What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. In today's video, we're going to be learning to set up phone number authentication with an SMS code for your iOS app. So here is the app we're going to put together. First and foremost, we need to enter a number, big surprise. So we're going to enter in a mock number that I set up for testing. So let's go ahead and enter that in. We're going to then hit continue. Now on the simulator, we get this intermittent verification screen by design. On your device, you wouldn't see that. And then we get to the screen to enter the SMS code, super secure SMS code, 6 ones. And finally, once we hit continue, it'll verify and log us in. Now the coolest part about this, of course, we remain logged in. So if I close and reopen, boom, still logged in. So if that sounds good, drop a like down below. It's been a while since I did a video. Hit subscribe if you're new to this channel, and let's build this out. All right, we're gonna get started by opening up Xcode and creating a new project. We're going to stick with the app template under iOS as soon as Xcode decides to stop being slow here. In the meantime, I've also got Firebase opened up here. We're going to deal with that in a second. Let's select app under iOS. I'm going to go ahead and give this project a name of Phone Auth. Go ahead and make sure your UI is storyboard, your user interface style, and your language is Swift. Let's continue here. We'll toss it onto our desktop and get into it straight away. So because we're going to be using Firebase as the infra to actually do the phone authentication, we first need to bring in said dependency. So I'm going to actually go ahead and close up Xcode, and we are going to open up terminal and cd into our project. So we're going to go to desktop, and we're going to go to from there our project folder, which is phone auth. We're going to run pod init to initialize CocoaPods, just like so. And then we're going to go ahead and open up the pod file that it should have created for us. Now in here, we're going to bring in one dependency, and the dependency is going to be Firebase/auth. Big surprise, authentication. We're going to lowercase that p so it doesn't give us any issues. And then we can go ahead in terminal and run pod install. Now this is going to basically install the Firebase authentication dependency. And while it's doing that, we can actually go ahead and start to set up our Firebase application on Firebase's console. So I've got my logged in account here. I'm going to click it to add a new project. I'm going to go into here and type in maybe phone auth as my new project name. We're going to continue, pretend like we read all this. We're going to select a default account for analytics, which is irrelevant. Let that do its thing. It's creating the project, and we're going to wait for this to finish up here. Hopefully it doesn't take too long. Basically, the premise of phone authentication is we're going to, enter in a phone number, it's going to send us a text, and we're going to input the code that we get, and that's going to complete the whole authentication flow. Now, Firebase does in fact offer a way to use phone numbers that are quote-unquote test and dummy numbers, so we're going to be using that in today's video. So let's come into here and select iOS. We're going to need to give our application's bundle ID and the general name, so I'm going to go ahead and call this phone, maybe auth iOS. And once this is done installing, we can actually go ahead and open up the project one more time. Since it's being a little slow, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cheat a little bit and open up the Xcode proj just so I can grab the bundle ID while that installs and does its thing. So we're going to select this, and I'm going to copy this bundle ID, which should be unique for you, our bundle identifier. We're going to go ahead and paste it on in here. I'm going to go and hit continue, which is going to generate a Google services file for us. Give it a second. There it is. We basically need to download and include this in our project, so I'll toss it onto my desktop here. Hit next a couple of times. It's telling us to install basically the dependencies, which we have done already. So let that do its thing. Hopefully it's almost done. It does end up taking a little bit of time. Apparently this time it's taking much longer. So perhaps I'll pause the video here. Maybe we'll just wait it out. So feel free to jump ahead once these dependencies have finished installing. We'll go ahead and open up the workspace. After you install it the first time, every subsequent pod installs much faster, and actually looks like it finished as soon as I decided to be impatient. So we can now close up terminal And now we're going to jump into the XC workspace it has created for us. Cool. So now in Xcode, what we want to do is actually bring in this Google Services file, and we want to get into the code of actual phone authentication. So how do we do that? Well, first things first, in the app delegate, we need to initialize Firebase. So we're going to go ahead and say import Firebase, just like that. We can just import core. And then in the first function here for application did finish launching, we are going to say Firebase app, and we're going to go ahead and hit configure, and that's going to basically do what it sounds like. I'm also going to change the simulator here to maybe a 12 Pro Max, and we're going to go ahead and hit Command B to build our project. Now while it's doing that, let's write the code to actually do the phone authentication. So we're going to go ahead and create a new file here, and I like to name things as appropriately as possible, so we're going to create a manager which is going to handle auth, hence we're going to call it auth manager. Now in this class, we're going to be writing functions to basically handle, starting the authentication flow once the user actually inputs their phone number, as well as verifying the SMS code that they enter is correct as well. So we're going to go ahead and create this as a single shared instance, hence the static let shared. And basically, let's define two functions to handle what I just described. So the first one, I'm going to go ahead and say start auth, and it's going to take in a phone number, which should be a string, and then it's going to take in a completion handler, which will basically be a callback, whether or not the start of the authentication flow has succeeded. So we'll go ahead and do that. Looks like our build just succeeded here as well. And let me go ahead and copy and paste this and write the other function. And this other one is going to be verify code, which is going to take in the user's inputted SMS code as well as a callback, and this callback is going to basically represent if the user has successfully signed in. So while we're in here, we might as well implement these functions. So let's go ahead and import Firebase auth, and I'm going to go ahead and create an instance of the auth object, which is going to be called auth, and I'm going to go ahead and say this is auth.auth, which might be a little confusing how Google has named it, but that's in fact what you will want here. And let's write out these two functions. So we're going to have three screens in our app. The first one, it'll ask you to input basically your phone number here, and then assuming we start the process, the next screen will ask you to input the SMS code, and the third screen will basically be if you're successfully signed in or not. So that all said, let's go ahead and do it. So we're going to start the authentication flow by first getting the provider. So there is something called phone auth provider, and you can get the provider off of that. And the very first thing that you want to actually do is call a function which is verify phone number. And we want the one without multi-factor. So the first thing we're going to pass in here is the actual phone number. The UI delegate is a little irrelevant for this video, so we'll pass in nil. And the completion handler is going to give us back basically a verification ID as well as an error. So in the callback, we want to take care of two things. We want to make sure that we actually have a verification ID, and we also want to make sure that the error is nil, implying nothing has gone wrong. So we'll go ahead and unwrap both of those, or verification ID, verify error is nil. Now your next question might be, well, what the heck is this verification ID thing? It's basically a string that's generated when you call this function, and we need to hang on to it for when the user tries to verify the SMS code. It's another layer of security that the phone auth provider gives us. So what we want to go ahead and do here is we want to capture weak self, and I'm going to hang on to this verification ID on this auth manager class. So essentially I'm going to add a private property. It's going to be named the same thing, and its type is going to be a string optional. And down here we can now say self dot the verification ID is going to be verification ID, and we can call the completion handler and say true, everything succeeded. And in this case, if something went wrong, we're going to go ahead and say false, just like that. And that's basically all you need to do for this first function here. And in this other function, all we now need to do is try to create a credential and actually log the user in. or authenticate them. So how do you create a credential? Well, we're going to say let's credential is going to be, once again, the phone auth provider, and then we're going to say .credential. Now this credential is going to take in a verification ID as well as a code. The code is going to be the SMS code that the user has passed in, that we're going to pass in as this parameter right here. And the verification ID is the ID that was generated when we made this first call. So you guys guessed it, we're going to unwrap it up here, and that's what we are going to provide. So I'm going to go ahead and say guard let verification ID is a verification ID, and if we don't have it for any reason, that means something has gone horribly wrong. So we're going to call the completion handler and pass back false. And we're almost done, believe it or not. Now that we have a credential, we're going to ask the auth manager to sign us in. So we're going to say sign in with credential. And it's this first one here. We're going to pass in the credential, and the completion handler is going to give us a result and a error. And we're just going to verify that the result is non-nil. And we're also going to verify that the error is nil. If something goes wrong and we end up in the else, we're going to say completion false. Otherwise, we're going to go ahead and say completion true. And that's literally how you set up phone authentication with Firebase. So let's actually build out the UI. I'm not going to make it too nice aesthetically, but just to test this out. Now, before we actually do that, back in our Firebase console, we do need to enable phone-based authentication. So we need to go under build, authentication, and we're going to hit the button to get started here. And we're going to get this screen, and we have all the providers that Firebase supports. We're going to select phone, and we need to enable it. So we've got this first switch here. So we're going to set this to enabled, just like that. We're going to hit save. And like I mentioned, we're going to be using a mock number to test this out. So we're going to hit this again, and there is an option here, phone numbers for testing, which you can see is optional. We're going to hit the drop down, and you can see here that we can add a number with the prefix 650 and 555. So I'm going to do that exactly, and then we're going to give a code on the right hand side too. So we're going to say +1 650 555, and maybe we'll do 1111. And the code here is going to be 111111. So 6 ones. I think the logic here is 650 is not a valid US number prefix, which is why we can use it as a test number. We'll go ahead and hit add, and let's build out the UI and test this end to end. So just so you guys can see, back in this tab, we don't have any users currently. If I refresh this page, let's go ahead and build out our UI. So currently our UI is empty, shocker, shocker. So what we want to actually do is a couple things. So we're going to get rid of the storyboard, which gets created by default with this template. So we're going to select main there. I'm going to hit delete and then move to trash. And respectively, we're going to have to go into the, I believe, info.plist, and we're going to open up this like scene manifest all the way down until we find where the main storyboard is referenced, which is indeed right here. And we're going to go ahead and get rid of it. Now, this begs the question, what screen is our app's initial screen? So that is going to be this view controller here. So I'm going to go ahead and call this. This one is going to be phone view controller, and we're just going to create a few more view controllers so we can actually hook up this whole thing end to end. So I'm going to create a folder here on the left hand side that is going to be called controllers so we can keep things somewhat organized. So we're going to call that controllers. I'll toss that in there. And let me go ahead and create 2 more controllers. One for the account view controller, which is basically what we're going to see when the user has signed in. So I'm going to say account view controller. It's going to be subclassing view controller in Swift. We'll create one more, and this other one here is going to be SMS code. You can say SMS code view controller, and this one, shocker, shocker, is going to be where the user inputs their SMS code. The other thing we want to go ahead and do in the scene delegate is actually configure, what gets shown once the user launches the app. So this thing here, let's go ahead and fix this. This thing here is going to be a window scene. And what we want to go ahead and do is figure out if the user is signed in. So let me go ahead and import Firebase Auth. And we're going to do a couple things to set up the window. Well, first and foremost, we need to instantiate a window that our app is going to be hosted in. We're going to pass in that window scene. Now, let's see, right below this, we're going to want to go ahead and say self.window is going to be window. Above this, we're going to say window, make key and visible. And based on if the user signed in, we're going to show the logged in state. Otherwise, we're going to go ahead and show the phone number view controller. So how do we check if the user is signed in? We're going to say if auth.auth, let's try that again, auth.auth.current user is nil, aka we are not signed in. We're going to go ahead and create a view controller, which is going to be our phone view controller. I'm going to go ahead and give it a title of sign in. We're going to wrap it inside of a navigation view controller just so we get that nice top bar. So we're going to say navigation controller, root controller is going to be VC, just like that. And we're going to say window.root view controller is nav VC. Now in the other case, in the case that we are signed in, this one's much easier. We're simply going to say let's try that again, window.root view controller will be our logged in state, which we have called account view controller. So let's go and build out these screens. I'm going to keep it simple, hopefully, and then we can test this end to end. So first things first, all we really need on this screen is a text field. So I'm going to call this a phone field. I'm not going to go too crazy, like I said, with customization here. We're just going to set a background color and a placeholder. So we'll say the field is a UI text field. I'll say field.text alignment perhaps is going to be centered. We'll return said field here. Also go ahead and, like I said, give it a background color of maybe secondary system background, this one here. And finally, we're going to give it a placeholder, and this is going to be phone number. So let's go ahead and add this. So we need to give this a background color as well. So this thing here will be system background, just like that. We are going to go ahead and say view, add subview. That's not how you spell it, add subview. Let's try that one more time. We're going to say phone field. We're going to go ahead and also give this guy a frame. So we'll say the frame here for the phone field will be cgrect 00. Maybe we'll make it, I don't know, 220 by 50. And just for the sake of being lazy, we'll just go ahead and center this guy. So I'm going to say phone fields dot center is going to be view dot center. Now, how do we know once the user is done inputting a phone number? So I'm going to go ahead and use the delegate to do that. So we're going to go ahead and say delegate is self. And once the user hits the done button on the field, we're going to go ahead and try to proceed. So we're going to say the return key type is one of the properties on here. The dot return key, I believe, there it is going to maybe be continue. And we're going to conform here to the UI text field delegate. And the only function we care about is should return. And what this is going to do is get called once the user presses that continue button. So what do we want to do? Well, we're going to get rid of the keyboard on the field, and we're going to check the phone number inside the field. So I'm going to go ahead and say the text in the field is going to be the text field dot text, not phone number. I'm getting ahead of myself. And we are also going to be smart about this and make sure that the text isn't actually empty, because if we just enter empty text, that's not doing ourselves any favors. So assuming that is the case, we're going to go ahead and say auth manager, what we typed out already, .shared, and we're going to go ahead and call that start function. We're going to pass in the phone number, which we'll do in a second, and then we're going to have a callback here, which will give us success. So let's see, start auth, we'll take in that phone number. So I'm going to go ahead and say number here. And this is going to be success. And assuming we have succeeded, we're going to push to the next controller, the next screen, to enter in the SMS code. So we're going to say guard let success, or guard success, I should say, assuming it is true. We are going to go to the next screen. So here we are going to say dispatch queue .main .async. We want to go to the next screen. So here we can go ahead and say let VC. And the reason this color coding is kind of off is because we have not defined this yet. So let me just do that so it stops yelling at me. The reason I didn't define this is I wanted to call out you do need to add the country code as a prefix to your phone number, which we're doing manually here. +1 is for the United States. So the next thing we're going to do is create that SMS code controller, and we're going to go ahead and push this controller onto the stack. So hopefully everyone's following along. I know I'm going a little quick here. We're going to set a title on this, and we're going to say enter code maybe is the title. And let's see, let me actually go ahead and give this a run and make sure that we're making progress here. So secondary system background, let's see, this should not be an image. This should be background color is what I'm looking for, which is why we have that strange error. And let's see, let's go ahead and hit Command B, make sure it's building. Let me go ahead and just give it a run here. Make sure we're at least seeing our phone field. So looks like the app is still building, hopefully finishes up in a quick second. Looks like we have an error somewhere, that's not good. So let's figure out what I have broken here. So it looks like we have an equal here. Let's see, window scene. We need a space before that for some odd reason because Xcode says I do. Looks like we have built, running in our simulator, and we should see hopefully that phone number field here in a quick second. Simulator loves to be slow sometimes, so just bear with it. Looks like the device is actually crashing, so due to uncaught exception, it can't find the main storyboard. So the reason it can't find it, or the reason it's looking for it, I should say, is because we still need to get rid of in the info plist, I believe, the name of the main storyboard. So if we click on info up here, we should see main storyboard somewhere in this list. So I see launch screen. Let's see if I can find it here. But we do need to get rid of it. It's right here. So I'm going to get rid of that main storyboard. Just select it and hit Command. Select it, hit backspace and Command R to give it a run. This way our project knows that it needs to go take a look at our code to actually go ahead and run the app. So it looks like it's still crashing. Let's see what other references we have of that storyboard. I want to bet it's somewhere in here. So let's go ahead and open up this application scene manifest. I believe we need to update it here as well. So we're going to open this up all the way. And in here, I also see main. So I'm going to select it and hit backspace. Hit it one more time to build and run, Command R, and hopefully we now start to see our UI if everyone crosses their fingers. All right, we're so now seeing our UI. So I want to come in here, we're going to tap it, and we're going to type in that phone number. But before we do that, let's go ahead and actually build the next screen since we need that to actually fully authenticate with the SMS code. Now I'm going to be lazy and we're going to copy this entire view controller and I'm going to paste it in SMS controller. So we're going to copy this guy, I'm going to paste it here, and the only difference is we're going to change the name of the class so it doesn't conflict. Let's go ahead and do that. And let's see what we want to do. I'm going to rename this to be a code field. We're going to also call this enter code, just like that. And let's just rename some of the other contents. So phone fields to code. I'm going to update this. And let's see what else we need to do. Now, once the user has hit return, in this case, instead of getting the phone number, what we're getting is the code. So the text is actually the code. And what we want to go ahead and do is pretty similar actually, but instead of saying start, the other function that we have added, I believe, is we're going to say verify code. We're going to pass in the code, and this completion handler is basically going to be identical. So I've copied and pasted the previous one. So we're going to validate success. And if we succeed, we're going to go ahead and show the account controller now, because presumably we are now signed in. So how do we show the account controller? We're simply going to say self. We're going to present VC animated. Whoops, that's not how you spell animated. Animated true, and that should hopefully be sufficient to present this screen. So let's see what is going on here. This should be code, which is going to be lowercase, is what we have defined right up there. And let's see, the other thing I'm going to do is say vc.modal presentation style, and this guy is going to be full screen, and we should be in business. So let me go ahead and give this a run. Looks like we have a problem here for presenting, and the reason is because we need to capture weak self so we don't cause a memory leak. Let's go through this end to end, and then I'm going to do a recap since I did this pretty quick. Keep in mind our account controller doesn't quite have anything on it, so just to verify that we are actually signed in, what I'm going to do is set a maybe background color to this, and the background color here is going to be system, maybe green to indicate successful logging in. So go ahead and give that a run. Now let's do this end to end. So if we come back here, we see that our test phone number in our methods here, I believe was something like 650-555, I believe 111. So let me go in there and find it again. I'm going to go to phone, and then we're going to open up the test number. So 650-555-1111. Now, one thing I'm going to call out also, when you test this on a simulator, it does go to a in-between Safari window to verify that you're authenticating correctly. When you do this on a device, it will not show that, and it'll actually set it up correctly to actually send a verification code. So just a brief call out there. Let me type in the proper phone number. So that is looking good. We are going to hit continue here. It should push us to the next screen. It looks like we've crashed, so let's see what is going on. We're going to take care of whatever is crashing here. So we need to actually register the custom URI scheme. So this is actually important. This is one thing that I have forgotten to do. So you need to register a backwards client ID scheme in the info. So this is actually a good reminder for myself as well. So if we go to our application here, we're actually on the info tab already. So we're going to hit this. And let's see if I can find where we need to add it. I believe it's under the original info tab. There should be URL types, which is this guy here. We're going to select it. I'm going to go ahead and hit plus, so it brings in a new entry just like that. And it's essentially telling us in the crash here what has gone wrong. So what we want to go ahead and do is we want to copy, instead of this, I'm going to do it down here. So back in our Google Services plist that we have brought into the project, let's see where I have tossed it. If you open this up, you're going to find an entry for reversed client ID. So it's this guy right here. You want to go ahead and copy that and jump back here, open up that URL type again, and you're going to want to paste that in, I believe, to the URL scheme here, and that should be sufficient. So I'm not sure if we quite need an identifier icon. I don't think we do. Let's go ahead and run this again and see if that is required. If it is, we'll have to peek at the documentation. So hopefully second time's a charm and we don't need a third. So we're going to select this. I'm going to type in that number. Hopefully I type in the correct number. All right, looks like 650-555 and then 4 ones. We're going to go ahead and expand this here. Let me also clear this out. Let's go ahead and hit continue. And it looks like it has actually loaded properly. It's going to that intermittent screen that I had mentioned, and it pushes over to SMS code. Beautiful. And now what we want to go ahead and do is enter in the mock code, which is 3 ones. So 111. 111, 6 ones basically, and just like that we hit continue and we should be logged in and see the green screen. So boom, you've done it. You set up phone authentication. Now the coolest part about this is if I stop running the app and I go ahead and give it a run, you'll see that we remain logged in. It should not show us that authentication again. And if we come back to Firebase and I go to the first tab where we see our users, we'll see another user for the phone number right here that we have added. Now, a couple of things I would love to note before I wrap up here. In the phone view controller, we actually explicitly said +1 for the prefix when we went to this auth. We said +1 plus the number. So it's important that you prefix your country code. There are libraries out there from Google actually themselves that allow you to properly insert the prefix number. So I can make a separate video on that, but just keep in mind, if you don't include this, you're going to run into a whole lot of issues. The other thing that you guys saw, you definitely need to bring in the URL scheme. That basically allows Firebase to go and verify on the simulator the actual authenticity of where the request is coming from. And that's basically it. That is Firebase SMS-based authentication with the phone number in a nutshell. So this video got way longer than I intended, which is why I've been kicking this video down the road. But I'm glad I finally got a chance to do it. If you enjoyed the video, drop a like down below if you haven't done so already. Hit subscribe for more. Drop a comment if you had any issues. I try to answer every single comment as soon as I can. Thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next one.